Thank you, everybody, for making time to join us in for this first maiden edition of the Media Relations Group's event. Today, first, let me introduce myself. My name is Afolabi Adio. I'm currently the chairman of the Media Relations Group at the PRCA. And today we've got the pleasure of having a very good friend of mine and a very high-up person within news and communication come and share his vast experience with us. Dick Bromley has spent 20 years in news, wire, and communication business. He's held various senior positions around the globe, both at Business Wire, Issuer Direct, and most recently, he also served as at Issuers Direct Executive Vice President for Sales based out of North Carolina, before returning back now to the UK to start his new role as the head of sales at News Direct. Dick Bromley has worked with some of the world's largest organizations, the likes of Apple, TomTom, in assisting them with their global communications needs. I mean, and he's worked in San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, which was the hub of where everything used to happen a couple of years back. Thank you very much, Dick, for making time to kind of share your thoughts and experience with us today. And the floor is open to you.
Thank you. Wow, what an intro. Thank you, Adio. I appreciate that very much. I've got a lot to live up to based on that. So what a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly delighted. I'm back in the UK. I'm back on home territory, and it's fantastic, despite everything that's sort of raging on around us. So again, thank you to the PRCA as well for allowing me to be a part of today's discussion. So for those of you who don't know me, Richard Bromley, I'm been in the business, as Adio said, for around 20 years now. 2020, quite extraordinary to think what a year this has been. The seismic changes that have swept through our entire industry. So just before I kick off, I want to just pay tribute to those folks maybe on the call and other people that we know that are currently out of work at this moment in time. We understand how difficult that is, and of course we all need to lean on each other as we go through these very tough times. So my background is all about press releases. I've lived, I've breathed, I've even sort of dreamt about press releases for over 20 years. As Adio said, I've worked for two of the big four news distribution companies. I was at Business Wire in the year 2000 when we set up their first international office, and again, feel very privileged, very fortunate to have lived and worked in places as far afield as San Francisco and in Raleigh. As I say, I'm back here on home turf now. Feel absolutely delighted to be back in a new company, a company called News Direct, which has been set up to try and take out some of the pain points and the inertia associated with some of the traditional wire services. Forgive the plug, I'm sure you will, just very quickly, we've been dubbed as a revolution in news distribution. So very excited about what we are bringing to the table. Many highlights in my career, way too many to recount today. I've been in some incredibly stressful situations. Clients desperately trying to get out press releases and screaming at me. I've had people turn up to my old office in London threatening to knock my lights out because we were looking to stop press releases going out. Even last week, I had the pleasure of having a fake passport sent to us when we were looking to verify the source of a document. Very, very scary times indeed. Lots of scams going on. So we're keeping a close eye out on all of those things. I've seen releases about the passing of famous business leaders, closures and bankruptcies of huge multinational companies. But I think my all-time favorite and the thing that I get the most pleasure out of is watching companies that have come to us in their early infancy, if you like, start to become household names, and people who couldn't pay their bills now multi-billionaires. So very exciting. And I think, honestly, with what the newswires play now, it's a very important part in the entire ecosystem of content production and pushing out news to the newspapers, the TV, the radio, the blogs, etc., etc. So delighted to be a part of that and to be talking you through the state of the press release in 2020. So today we're going to take a brief look at the history of the press release. We're going to look at some basic do's and don'ts, as well as peel back the lid on some of the myths surrounding what makes a truly great press release. So I'm going to show you some examples of best practices and share with you some feedback that I've received from our friends at the Press Association, some eye-opening candor there from them. From a housekeeping perspective, just very quickly, I believe there is a way for you, to ask questions as we go through each slide. You are all muted now, so please type out your questions and I'll be glad to answer them at the end of the session. We're slated for around 30 minutes for my slides, and then we're open for Q&A for around 15 minutes. So let's take a look at the history of the press release. Some fun facts that I'm sure will undoubtedly enrich your lives, and you never know, you might even get this in a pub quiz post-COVID. But did you know, or can you guess, when the first press release came into being? I didn't know this at all. I'm probably a little embarrassed to tell you that, but actually much later than I thought. It was 1906 to be precise. That's the time and the year when the Pennsylvania Railroad Company witnessed the tragic accident that killed, very sadly, 50 people. So in response to this tragic accident, the rail company's publicity expert, probably one of the world's first PR pros here, a gentleman called Mr. Ivy Lee, detailed what happened, and he sent a release that was actually picked up, as legend goes, in the New York Times on a completely verbatim basis. Wouldn't that be fantastic if that was the way today? And it told the story from the perspective of the company. So voila, the press release was born. And then Mr. Lee followed up with what he calls a declaration of principles. And this was done when he was accused of attempting to manipulate press releases, and which now to this day still serves as the foundation for journalistic integrity. The movement to publish news on behalf of a company and to do so honestly led to a barrage of other companies publishing press releases to announce the company news. So he talks about, and we'll go over this very quickly, this is not a secret press bureau. All our work is done in the open. We aim to supply news. This is not an advertising agency. If you think any of our matter ought properly to go to your business office, do not use it. Our matter is accurate. Further details on any subject treated will be supplied promptly, and any editor will be assisted most cheerfully in verifying directly any statement of fact. You know, it's amazing to me, at least, that the format of the content in a press release has actually changed very little in the 100 years or so that since that first release was sent. I was researching this in preparation for today's call, and I saw this release here from the 1980s announcing the new Porsche 924 for those car fanatics out there. And in fact, in general, the majority of releases that I reviewed all still follow the same formula. They still follow that right from when I was looking back, and I could find examples from the 60s and the 70s. And again, forgive me, I know there's a lot of folks here who are very experienced in writing press releases, so I want to take a few moments just to go through the basic anatomy. Please tune out if this is, of course, something that you're familiar with. We have a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds today. So follow the basic principles, something that even the Press Association, when I was asking for feedback, gave me: who, what, where, when, and why. So the basic anatomy follows the same principle today as we've talked about, has been used for the last few decades. The headline, the subheadline, the dateline, the lead paragraph, the body paragraph, the quotations, possibly and hopefully from C-level executives, the boilerplate, and the contact information. And most importantly, as our friends at The Guardian have pointed out, it must be newsworthy. If there's one thing that you take from this presentation today, your press release must be newsworthy. Before you even attempt to write a press release, according to The Guardian, think about the things that you like to read, watch, and listen to in the media. Most of us are generally interested in things we haven't heard before, find surprising, or help solve our problems. So before drafting your press release, it's worth asking yourself these questions. Number one, is there anything new in my story? Number two, is there anything unusual or unexpected about it? Number three, would this be of interest to anyone outside of my business? And number four, will anyone actually care? So that last one sounds pretty harsh, but it's probably the most important. You might be excited about your marketing director or the launch of your new product, but will anyone else be interested? If the answer is no, they suggest holding off into that press release until you've got a better story. Of course, whilst the basic flow hasn't changed much, a lot has changed about how press releases are distributed and shared. Mr. Ivy, going back to 1906, he shared his hand-to-hand, one reporter at a time. For many years, releases were distributed similarly to newspapers and reporters on paper. Even today, I was on a trip in Japan about 2 years ago, and I was invited to speak at the very prestigious press club in Tokyo. And it was there that I witnessed press releases being stuffed into journalist pigeonholes, which I was completely stunned by. Obviously far from the norm, but nonetheless, it still happens. And modern storytelling now, as we know, involves the wire services, email, websites, and of course, social media. Modern press releases also include multimedia, hyperlinks, and video. So obviously the technology has, of course, evolved incredibly, and particularly accelerated within the last 10 years or so. I recall a front page article in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago, where one of the wire services had been held accountable to the fact that certain third parties were allegedly able to access the press release a few milliseconds ahead of anyone else. What is a few milliseconds? Well, it turns out that's quite a big deal, because in an era of computer-driven trading and the super fast communications that exist now, a split-second advantage can literally result in someone profiting in the millions of pounds and dollars. That's quite extraordinary to me. So to put it simply, the distribution has evolved along with the technology. And it's no surprises that with the advances in the communication, the PR pro rolled with the times and shared releases with journalists in the way that they're best received and to be most successful. So all in all, I find it quite extraordinary that at their core, press releases haven't changed much in the last 100 years or so. The structure and their general purpose, getting your news to the public and journalists, has remained the same. As Meltwater, a big player in this market, points out, and I think this points it out perfectly, technology has helped press releases to evolve into a modern tool while still allowing them to maintain roots. So over the years of me making an honest living out of press release distribution, the most common thing that I've heard time and time and time again, and I'm sure Adio did when he was at his previous two companies, is the press release is dead. You know, people get quite angry about it from time to time. It can be a little scary. Indeed, back in 2016, at none other than the PRCA's national conference, a very high-profile PR argued that the PR industry was still too focused on the cozy process of writing press releases, and asserted that press officers should be content producers, and that they should understand that tweets, infographics, and videos may be a more relevant and modern way of disseminating a message. There were those who agreed, and to this day refuse to use press releases to get their message across. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was hung up on by a lady at a PR agency who proclaimed, rather rudely, I have to say, "When are you people going to effing understand that you serve no purpose?" You definitely need a thick skin in this game, that's for sure. However, there were others that disagreed about this. Frank PR, Senior Account Director Rich Lee, tweeted that the press release's death has been proclaimed for the 6,327th time. They're like Kenny from South Park. Others were absolutely more direct, and this one is my favorite. Weber Shandwick, chairman of UK Corporate, Financial and Public Affairs, a gentleman called Mr. John McLeod, simply proclaimed it's bollocks. I like that one a lot. But nothing does divide the PR community more than debating the efficacy of using press releases as part of a communications tool. You know, it's interesting for me, even geographically, and how we use press releases in the UK and in Europe versus the US. They're just worlds apart. When I spent time over in the US, I found at least 95% of all publicly traded companies used a newswire to disseminate not just their price-sensitive IR news, but also their PR news as well. And you may or may not know this, the major wires are disseminating around 1,000 press releases a day. So an incredible amount that I think, whether you loathe them or love them, is testament to the service that they carry out. So what I want to do now is take a look at the state of the PR in 2020. So undoubtedly, we are consuming more news than ever before, and the press release numbers from the major wires, as I've just said, are still very robust. They're up there now. In some cases, as I've seen from some of the public statements made by the wires, even higher now than they were pre-2020. I suppose when you really look at it, that's not really a major surprise when you consider just the topsy-turvy year that we've had, whether that's keeping up with reviewing the health news that's out there re-COVID, or just attempting to fill the endless hours that some of us have been gifted with. We're using and turning to social channels, we're turning to blogs, news apps to suck up news from every angle. So I think this provides an excellent opportunity for businesses to catch audiences' attention. The fact remains that there are fewer reporters on hand today to fill this massive need for content. And as we hear from our friends at the PA, newsrooms are working harder and faster than ever before. Reporters are actively looking for relevant, useful news. So how do you catch a reporter's eye with your news release? Well, as Business Wire commented, create and distribute a complete news package, something with a strong, relevant headline, useful data points, and multimedia imagery that's designed to appeal to news media readers, not your company's marketing audiences. So let's look at some steps here to write a press release in 2020. So according to Serena at Business Wire, one of their director of product marketing, kick off your release with a bold and blunt headline. Your headline is the gatekeeper to your news release. To write an attention-grabbing headline, use 4 steps from a lady called Anne Wiley. She's CEO of Wiley Communications, and I have her URL up on the next slide. Be concise. Try to keep your headline to around 5 to 8 words. Focus on your audience, not your company or your product. Use an exciting verb and skip adjectives and adverbs. And if you're focusing on online audiences, this is a great tip. Consider using Google Trends to identify if your chosen words match user search terms. So hook with your subheadline here. Subheadlines, of course, not opened until the news release is opened. So don't hide any key information there. Instead, use that space to continue the story that your headline tells. Be brief and keep that down if you can to a sentence or 2. This one stunned me. Again, borrowing from Serena here for a second, I think this sums up perfectly the state of the union at this moment in time. Is the entire world speaks in images now. And Serena even goes so far as to suggest that reporters cannot publish a press release without the use of some form of multimedia. In fact, PRN, one of the biggest players in the market here, seemed to agree. And this, again, was very eye-opening for me. In short, you get 14% more engagement when you add a photo with a text release. You get 20% when you add a video. You get 48% when you are using a photo and a video. And then you get an incredible 77% when you use a video, photo, and other. And other we believe to be something like an infographic, which I'm going to show you an example of shortly. So as Serena says, take the time to create a new multimedia asset, a photo, image card, GIF, or video that shows how your news impacts your audience, but without the sales pitch. So when it comes to writing the body of your press release, again, heading back to Anne Wiley here at wileycomms.com, she talks about best practice of using formatting to help tell your story. Bolded headers, bullets, italics, emphasizing your key points. And whilst we haven't got time today to go through all the specifics, I would certainly recommend using her website for a resource for you. It's got a staggering amount of very, very helpful information, no matter how many years you've been in public relations. I personally use it to look to stay on top of some industry trends. Again, this might seem an obvious one, but no real surprise that the major wires here are mandating the use of contact details within a press release. Whilst that may have, to a certain extent, relaxed a little, I think some of them now are suggesting that it can be an email or a phone call, a telephone number, my apologies. The reality is that journalists do find both to be crucial. Make it easy to get in touch. A tip that I have here for people looking to use perhaps a newswire for the first time and a way to check the efficacy of your campaign with that newswire, or indeed perhaps something that you're doing independently, is to create the alias type of email. So newsdirect@companyname.com. Anything that you get to this email that's good, bad, or indifferent for that matter, you know that has come as a direct result of that campaign that you're running, either independently or through one of the third parties there. Some of my clients, even very recently there, have started using a direct telephone number that they've set up. So anything that comes in directly to that telephone as well is as a direct result of that, helping them manage their return on investment with their current provider. So now that you've written your release, Serena suggests that it's time to test your work as well. Ask a coworker or a friend to read your release and to reiterate the key points. This will tell if your audience connected with your message or if revisions are needed. In 2020, there is undoubtedly that real opportunity there to secure the kind of editorial coverage that can be game-changing. All that you have to do is provide reporters with highly relevant textual and visual news that impacts their readers. So having been in the business for a long, long time, I have seen, as probably won't come as any major surprise, some really dull news press releases there. And I regret to say, unfortunately, far more than I could ever have imagined. Just for 1 second, just to recount a story, I remember probably around 10 years ago, taking a call from a client to discuss a quotation as it related to European press release distribution. And it was the company sector of a pretty small, pretty innocuous company. Let's just say that they were selling the equivalent of Dole widgets. Anyway, we had a discussion about disseminating their entire 120-page annual report to the European media points. And we had a long back and forth conversation about why this was completely unnecessary. There was no legal premise for them doing that, not to mention that the release would clearly provide them with very little pickup. The cost was an astonishing $100,000 plus, as I recall. You can imagine what you could do with 100,000 now in that. It's quite extraordinary. And even today, quite frankly, I'm surprised by both the quality of the content that we seem to get many times over, where spelling errors, poor punctuation, wars and wars of text, no calls to action, no multimedia, and then the client calls us 2 or 3 days later and asks why it didn't get any decent pickup. On a brighter note, I will say that the vast majority of the clients that I've worked with over the years, in fact, do know and do understand the critical importance of embracing best practices and understanding that they must never forget the basics. As I mentioned, I have a lot of exposure to some of the largest companies on the planet in my time at NSF, and I was very lucky to have learned so much from them in that regard. So let's take a deep dive into some of these examples here. I want to show you some examples of great press releases. Hopefully this is going to work. Moving now to a press release that was sent by News Direct, my new company. And in this company, we're talking the American Red Cross, who was talking about them having received cars from Toyota. And this is a terrific, it's a very well written release. It's very short. It's to the point. You'll see here, hopefully you can see this on my screen. You can see that they have embraced the use of multimedia there. They have included a selection of high-res images here through Dropbox, and something that still plays a part here, a vital part, is video B-roll. And they have different folks that are available for interview there from the various companies, the boilerplates for all 3 organizations, and again, media contacts and telephone numbers. Here also are the any downloads at all from the company logos. So that's a good one. That rather unsurprisingly, just given the names involved as well, created a lot of coverage. They were very happy with that. Another one I want to share with you is Groupon. Not that one, I'll come back to that. This is a release that includes an infographic, and it was disseminated a couple of years ago now, I think, and it talks about 40% of mums' fake reaction to Mother's Day gift. And what they have here is a very cool little infographic that, again, you probably can't see the full thing, but these are just magic. We're seeing so many folks there getting this pickup here. Media are loving these infographics, and very interestingly, we're seeing a lot of publicly traded companies as well send infographics now as part of earnings releases. As I'm sure most of you are aware, earnings releases can be very dull, 20-page wars of text, tables, the whole thing. So some of the forward-thinking companies there, both in the UK and in the US, are using infographics to have a sort of a synopsis, if you like, highlights of what they're doing. Just very quickly, this is a little bit fun. I just couldn't believe this. I was searching for the Groupon release earlier on, and I this is true. I think I was checking the date wasn't April the 1st, but apparently they make every day Mother's Day, you can actually get a life-size replica of yourself sent to your mum for $30,000, which is quite extraordinary. And you can see here there's some wonderful pictures to accompany that. So true, $30,000. There you go. This is a fascinating one. This is something that we've seen has been mentioned time and time again, and there's a little infographic that I want to share with you at the end. This is a release from Nintendo. I'm not a gamer, but I am told that Bowser is one of their characters that works with Nintendo. And what they've done here, very clever, it's a standard release. It has some text there with the tweet this function here, the contacts. All they did here is they had a little bit of humor, and they added that to a corporate release. So Doug Bowser brings decades of experience, not fire breath, to new role. And when I show you this, I'm going to just flip back if I can for a second. Hopefully you can see this now. This is an infographic that was part of the follow-up. And this is just simply stunning, just to show some of the smaller things that you can do. With this press release that ran, Business Wire received 533,000 news release views. For those of you that are using a newswire, the benchmark on that is in the low thousands. So to get 533 is truly incredible. It resulted in a 300% increase in their daily traffic, 517,000 headshot views. Interestingly, 60% of that came from social, and Reddit was their #1 referrer there. So just incredible. It just, for journalists looking for content with substance, is what that's all about. So finally, I wanted to share with you some answers to questions that I'd asked our friends at the Press Association, obviously the UK's national newswire. So in fear that the answers that I'd asked them may make this entire presentation completely worthless, I was rather relieved that for the most part, not all of it, but for the most part, they backed up what I've just been talking about these last 25 minutes or so. Very important. I think this is an important takeaway. One of the gents that responded directly was a gentleman called Simon Neville, who is the city editor at the PA. And now, of course, he deals mostly in price-sensitive financial types of releases. So please take that into consideration. And if you're in PR, financial PR, that's terrific. You can take these away directly from Simon. So I asked Simon, how do you prefer PROs and public relations folks get in contact, and what are their best times? So he made a couple of points here. He talks that his team work from 7 a.m., which is when the majority of the financial releases hit the wire, UK financial releases, that is. And he works from 7 to 5:30. He said, don't even consider speaking to me before 9 o'clock. 9 a.m. So he says 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. is a good time for sending those. Simon is not a fan of follow-ups, especially third or fourth follow-ups. I think by that stage, he's suggesting that we would have got the message. Again, I've heard these types of numbers being reverberated in before in these types of presentations, but even still, it's a shock. Just him and him alone, he is receiving 500 emails a day from people looking to pitch him. And I mean, that's just quite extraordinary, sort of filtering through the noise there. His absolute top tip, and he puts this in boldy capital letters, as you can see on the screen there, is remember you are writing for journalists and write with journalists in mind. We then got some great feedback from some of the individual journalists at the PA, covering a variety of desks. Again, one of the best things I saw here when it first came back was cover off what, when, who, where, and why. So no questions are left unanswered. Journalists are short on time, we know that. So if something needs too much rework, the chances are it won't get looked at. Go for visuals to drag you into the story. And I asked what was the best way to show those great images. But if you're using email, do that with one low-res image attached, then the top 6 to 10 photos that can be downloaded in one album. Make the one image that you attach the most attention grabbing, that tells the story itself without a caption. I always thought you had to have a caption, but it appears that they don't want a caption within that. Avoid the use of hyperbole and the overuse of adjectives. If you're saying things are worse, they say, then use figures and evidence to back that up from a credible source. And then use data in sectors and information on your company and put it in a story with a broader context. E.g., company X has found Y by looking at X government figures. So some truly fascinating stuff from the PA. That takes us over the 30-minute mark, ladies and gentlemen. And hopefully it will allow some time for questions. But in conclusion, I just want to point out, I think that a well-written, well-thought-out, newsworthy story is just as relevant today as it was 100 years ago. Technology has made the news release a very different beast, clearly, to what it was even 10 years ago. But the fact remains that the press release in whatever form is here to stay. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in the next 10 years. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. I would now like to open that up to questions. Adio, are you able?
Yes, I'm keeping an eye on the Q&A box to see what questions are coming through. One has just come through. I mean, the question here is they want to know how do they actually use, how do you apply the news wire to cut through this clutter of news? How do you use the news wire to cut through the clutter of news that's been received by journalists?
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, I think one of the things that we've seen, and I know that you will concur with, Eddie, I haven't done this for many years, is, and this is debated on many different forums, is how relevant a newswire is in today's day and age. And we always talk about using a newswire in conjunction with what you're currently doing. A newswire is there to amplify that story. So I would argue that it's a way of cutting through the clutter. It's very easy to find stories, for example, online with a newswire. It's also sending to other trade publications that are part of that. I think all the main newswires include those and wrap those in. And of course, there's the social element, the social sharing of that with the return on investment.
Okay, excellent, well said. So please, you can put in your questions. Let's see. I've got a question here. It says, you mentioned that you should write the press release for the journalist, but what about writing with the end reader in mind?
Absolutely. And again, I mean, I think that this speaks to the different types, the varying multitude of releases that are out there today. Again, what we're talking and what we're seeing a trend of, and that's been absolutely resonating in 2020, is literally just the cut and paste of that press release directly into news stories, along with those infographics. We have had people that write directly and do their own outreach to the journalists with a little bit of a different spin on it. So they have 2, even 3 versions of that press release out there. So yes, I think that's something that we've seen. And again, I will follow this up here with some examples as well that you can review.
Okay, so I've got another question as well. I think you might have maybe addressed this a little bit in your presentation. I mean, it's saying something about, I mean, journalists, we do know they get many press releases every day. That's a fact. And she wants to know, how can I make mine stand out? I mean, the press release is well written. They also use multimedia when they can. Yeah. So how can they actually make theirs stand out?
Yeah, I mean, again, I covered most of those points there. I think, it's keeping that newsworthy. It's not forgetting the basics as well. I mean, that's something that we've seen time and time again, and I think people continuing to forget that. Again, if we had every release coming in that was well written, that had a photo, that had calls to action, that was short, following all those points, then we would be in a significantly better place. So I think just following those basics there and paying attention to those is absolutely crucial.
I mean, Dick, would you say in this instance the wire can help when, I mean, we all, it's well written, they've got multimedia with it? Do you think the wire might help? Because there have been instances where we know, the wire can actually also create competition. The news is out there, everybody will want to be the first person to grab it. Do you think the wire would help in this instance?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, again, I touched on this a little bit in my presentation. I mean, the fact that the wires have been around for 60 plus years now, the fact that we're creating a new company here to directly compete with the larger ones there, I think speaks volumes. The reality of the situation is that they can absolutely help provide that amplification. Again, one of the things that is now a prerequisite for all the wire companies, I think, is to include a lot of the very granular ROI as well within each of those releases. We, for example, here at News Direct, we incorporate earned media coverage. We review social coverage and social sharing, and on a very, very granular basis there. We look at sentiment as well, which I think share a voice, which is important, where that's being picked up online. So yes, absolutely, I would argue that that newswire can help again cut through the clutter and amplify that release.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dick. And I'm still looking through all the open questions here. Okay, I've got another questions here. Would you ever opt for an exclusive to one journalist rather than a blanket press release?
Could you repeat the question?
So would you ever opt to have like an exclusive with one journalist than put out a press release? I mean, this has come up in some conversation that I have with clients where they say, look, you know what? I'm just giving this journalist the exclusive. Maybe the guy works for the Financial Times or he works for one of these tier one media companies. Would you prefer having those exclusive kind of arrangements, or would you like to say, look, you know what? No exclusive. I'm putting all that. I'm putting my news out there.
It's a great question. I wish I'd asked the PA the same thing. I will ask the PA the same thing, and I will get back to whoever asked that on the general channel, because it's a terrific question. I've seen that sort of rarely over the course of my experience, but I know it happens. But yeah, it's a fantastic question. I just wish I had a better answer, but I will get you that answer 100%.
Okay, absolutely. So Chris, we'll get back to you with the answers to that. I mean, in my own experience, times when people want to do that is when maybe they've got this exclusive relationship with a client and with a journalist, and they want him to be, they want to get it first, and after he publishes it, and maybe it's just, I think it's a way of kind of maintaining a relationship with journalists. That's the reason why I see maybe people do this sometimes. But we'll get back to you, Chris, with an answer to that.
Thank you, Chris. Great question. I will 100% put that out there.
Yeah. So we've got another question. So what is your advice on sending out multiple press releases about the same item? For example, sending a more generic version to national organization and more specialized one to local or specialist news organizations.
It's a fantastic question. So interestingly, the majority of wires will not let you repeat a press release. So one of the things that we used to have and that we do now to this day is we have different versions tailored for different markets. Not just a French version for France, but of course that helps naturally if you're going outside of the United Kingdom. It's almost a prerequisite there to translate. We didn't touch upon that today, but that is absolutely 100% best practice. And I think that it's something that we've allowed in the form of varying degrees of subtleties, if you like, in each of those releases. I definitely think that it is something that helps. Again, one of the things that we find here in Adio, I'm sure you'll remember this from your days at PR Newswire, is that you get one client who just does one press release and then calls you up and says, I'm on the BBC website right now and I can't find my press release. And we talk about that as a campaign. I mean, I'm not exaggerating, right? I mean, it does happen. And I think again, sort of that campaign, if you like, of releases is hugely important for any one client, and sort of subtle changes to that there. So I would concur that would be a good thing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I'm still looking through, just to be conscious of time. I'm looking at some of if any questions are coming through. I mean, I've got a question here, but it's more of expressing an opinion from Zoe Taylor. She said, like, I mean, they do all these things that we've suggested, and they're still getting very little response from the media this year. I mean, I think she understands that the media landscape is kind of difficult at the moment. So perhaps there may be a different way of approaching the media. I mean, this is I get this as well.
I think it's just a fact. Was it Zoe, did you say?
Her name is Zoe.
Zoe, give me a call after this. We do things a little differently in News Direct. You'll forgive the plug there. But no, I mean, all joking aside, I think it is a problem, right? I mean, I think we talked about, every single one of just the wires, and the four big players, they're doing over 1,000 releases a day. I mean, the fact that their numbers have gone up as well over the course of the last 10 months or so, I think speaks volumes. It's very, very difficult to cut through that clutter. And therein lies the rub and the problem. Again, my only advice on that again is keeps coming back to the basics. Again, looking at how many really poor releases that we see every day with spelling issues and punctuation issues and just walls and walls of text. It still amazes me. So I definitely recognize that it's anything but a normal year here. Again, I mean, I think the key here is that they are hungry for content. So I hope that we could help you in that. I'm certain we could, but yeah, I think it's a challenge.
Okay. So it's I mean for if you do still have any more questions, I mean, feel free to kind of send it to us via email. You can send it via Kyrie, and Kyrie will actually forward those questions to Dick Bromley for questions that we couldn't be able to take today. Thank you everybody for making time to attend this. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and also find it very informative as well. Get some knowledge of Dick Bromley based on this as well. And yeah, a lot of good. Thank you very much from Chris. I think quite a lot of people do enjoy this as well. And thank you as well, Dick, for taking time from your busy schedule. I had to pull out all the big guns to get you.
You're a gentleman, and thank you everybody for. I'm just seeing some of these comments. It means a huge amount. It's great to be back here, and I know we're all going through some tough times. So thank you again for your time, and Adio, thank you, and to the PRCA, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and very much for joining us. And enjoy the rest of your week, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.